How are you feeling about Monday? Are you excited?
Who?
Who of you? How do you feel about it? I mean, this is not. I'm just interested before we.
Oh, it's an open question. Yeah, Patrick, you want to start?
Hang on, I think I'm going to lose my pen already. Oh, here we go. No, you don't need to. We haven't officially started, but there's going to be people. Oh, already I can see lots of people joining us, which is brilliant.
Yeah. I'm probably more excited about the reaction that hopefully will come, because having gone through it essentially, kind of living it, it's taken me all the way down the road of feeling so much for what's gone on before.
Yeah.
And I kind of, I'm more tearful at everything.
I bet.
So,
well, we'll come on to that. So everyone who's listening, thank you. We're going to kick off in about 2 minutes. We're just waiting for everyone to join us. We're already getting pretty busy. So have there been any good parts of lockdown for you guys? Or how have you found it?
Well, I haven't
given you a chance to sort out your stuff, Patrick, sort out all your papers.
Yeah, because the weather's now a bit chillier. I'd be out there. I mean, I'm by the coast. I'm literally in South Wales, and it's glorious. I can't really say enough. And if I wasn't working, which obviously I'm not working, but if I wasn't sort of doing anything, I'd be doing what I'd be doing now, which is this. So for me, it's not that much different. And in all honesty, being an actor, you're in and out of work. So there's always going to be those sort of periods where you're going to have to just, keep yourself active and proactive to, hopefully you'll be doing something in a minute. So for me, it's been, dare I say it, quite good to not be traveling in to London and all the madness that
I have to say, I haven't missed the tube. That's one thing I definitely haven't missed.
Yeah.
Well, how about you guys? How's lockdown been for you two?
I've got a toddler, so I've gone back to full-time mom, which has its ups and downs. I'm just basically her bitch, if we can use that language. And
use that language.
Rules.
As Nadine would say, Stells, I'm tired.
I'm with you. I've got 3 kids at home. It's just a nightmare. I mean, it's so hard.
Ooh.
So, all right, we're going to kick off in 1 minute. Just Stephen, how are you doing? How's lockdown been for you?
Yeah, not bad actually. A bit similar to Patrick in the sense that it's not much has changed day to day. I spend a lot of time on my arse in front of a computer screen, and I'm still doing that. But but in terms of getting out and about and not going into I live in Southampton, so a bit like Patrick, I don't miss having to go into London every 2 minutes, and we've got a big common near the house here, so there's a lot of green space. So I know a lot of people have been stuck indoors without anything to sort of stretch out in. So I've been taking advantage of it. Even before the lockdown was eased, I was sort of, sneaking in 2 and 3 walks a day when you were only supposed to do 1, but that's just between us.
Yeah.
It's funny actually, now that it's eased, I'm not that bothered anymore. I'm going once a day.
Exactly.
It was breaking the rules.
Yeah. Sorry about breaking the rules.
All right, guys. Well, listen, I think we're going to kick off because we've got a good crowd here. So, first of all, hello. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name's Josie, and I'm one of the founders of Creative Access. I'm really excited to have about today's masterclass. It really is a privilege to have the 3 of you with us here today. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we kick off. If any of you would like to introduce yourself, all of you watching, just tell us who you are, where you live, what you're doing at the moment. You can just do so using the chat function, and we'll be able to see it. It'll be nice to see who's in the audience. If you've got any questions that arise for either Stella, Stephen or Patrick at any point, or all 3 of them, then can you do so via the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, not on the chat, and then we will attempt to answer or get through as many of your questions as possible. What else did I want to say? Yes, we we're on social media and we're going to be tweeting and Instagramming throughout. So please use the hashtag @_creative access, and we'll make sure to tag these guys as well throughout. And of course, BBC One, Left Bank Pictures and IJPR, thank you for your help organising today. We really are super excited. I'm not going to carry on, but I think before we start, before we introduce our brilliant guests, we're just going to do a very short introduction for those of you that haven't already seen it, which is the trailer for Monday's show. So just hold tight for 1 minute. It's only 1 minute, and then we'll head over to discussion. So over to you, Monica.
Open the door right now.
Anthony Bryan, I'm arresting you on suspicion of being an illegal resident.
Talking about
on behalf of the Home Office.
Claim to have lived in London since arrival.
It'd be really helpful is if we could see
your mother's original passport.
I lost my job.
Would you be willing to take a paternity test?
I lost my home.
A deportation order has been issued.
50 years I've been in this country. 50 years.
The Windrush scandal. One man's fight to prove he is British. Sitting in Limbo on BBC One and iPlayer.
Brilliant. Okay, so, oh, sorry, I've just come off video. Yeah, brilliant. I mean, God, where do we start? Can't wait to watch it. For starters, it's 8 o'clock, is that right, on Monday night?
8:30.
8:30. So obviously we'll all be watching it. Okay, so to start, I guess we should start with Stephen, really. Stephen, actually, before I start asking questions, the first thing I want to do is just get you all to introduce yourselves and say who you are and what you do, a little bit about yourselves, and then we're going to talk specifically about Sitting in Limbo. So Stephen, obviously you are the man behind this in the very first instance, but could you just tell us a bit about your life and how you came to, quick summary?
Okay, yeah, so I'm primarily a novelist. That's my kind of day job, if you like. So I've been writing for quite a while, over 20 years. In recent years, I've started to make the transition to writing for the screen. So I've been writing screenplays, feature lengths, films. I also do a little bit of directing. I've directed a documentary and I'm developing another one. How did I come to write this story? Well, obviously we know it's based on my brother's story. Initially the conversation was around maybe writing a book, a piece of non-fiction. I spoke to my agent about it and my publisher, they seemed quite keen. But the problem, I guess, we had that there was a lot of stuff out there already about the Windrush scandal, and also my brother was one of the more high-profile cases. There was quite a lot of stuff about him too. So there was a little bit of hesitation on the part of, well, how big an audience could we reach with that, given that there's so much out there already? So then we started talking about maybe doing it as a documentary. But once again, we realized that there were quite a few documentaries about the Windrush scandal, some of them for TV, some of them on radio. So the next step really was to think about maybe doing it as a TV drama. That is obviously a long way from that to where we are now. A lot of people needed convincing, but that's how we first came up with the idea of potentially doing it as a TV drama.
Okay.
And it was always driven by trying to reach a big audience, as big an audience as possible.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to come back to the audience. Can you just, for those people, I know that we obviously Anthony's had a lot of coverage, but for those people not familiar, can you just very quickly tell us this, an outline of the story? What happened to him?
Okay, so back in 2016, my brother tried to get a passport to go to see our mom in Jamaica. At the time, he hadn't left the country since he first arrived there in 1965, I think it is, or maybe 68, one of those. Over 50 years anyway. So, but he wasn't able to get a passport because since coming here, he hadn't ever left the country, and so he didn't have any kind of documentary evidence to prove that he was a British citizen. So I think the Home Office started to sort of target him and other people in that situation. Obviously, the context at the time was, the hostile environment and trying to get migration figures down apparently from the hundreds of thousands to the tens of thousands. And anybody who was, I think the phrase was, part of the low-hanging fruit were targeted. Unfortunately, it just happened to include lots of people who came over here from the West Indies and Africa and other parts of the Commonwealth in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s. So that's the story behind it. And he was arrested, detained twice, and threatened with deportation, and only managed to avoid that at the last minute because his partner Janet, who was also in the film, was able to secure an injunction against it. And that's essentially the drama that we're telling.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll come back to a lot of the points you've raised there. Patrick, a lot of people will recognise your face, I'm sure. Would you like to give us a quick synopsis of you and your career and life? And we know you're over in Wales, but...
Yeah, well, I've been an actor for, well, over 30 odd years now. I'm from Southeast London, Jamaican parents. I was born here, so a little younger than Stephen's brother, who obviously has gone through all of this, but I kind of feel it through my own experiences in being one of those Windrush children, as it were. But yes, so I've been an actor over 30 odd years, started my career at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and then went on to do Casualty for a good 6 years and done many other things after that. So yeah, that's basically me.
Tell us a few more of the things you've done.
Oh, quite a few things. I did The Bill. I was in The Bill for a while. I've directed and co-written a short film that I loved. and want to obviously do more of that. I did Strictly. Most people can say, oh, that's why I've seen your face. Yeah, I've done lots of dramas on the Beeb and ITV and a couple of films. So, yeah.
Lovely, thank you. And Stella, first of all, what have you done with the toddler at the moment? How did you manage to escape?
It's right there, about to explode into the room. So, yeah. I'm from Hackney. I'm a Hackney girl, but I'm Italian born. I came here when I was 5 years old. Grew up in Hackney. Always wanted to be a director. So started on set as a runner, then eventually and ADing, and eventually became a director's assistant to Sally Potter. That I did for 8 years. I also assisted a few other directors, so that's kind of where I learnt to filmmake. Did a short film through Film London, which did quite well. From that, I got onto another scheme called 4 Stories, which is a really great scheme. And I made a short for Channel 4, which was BAFTA nominated. So from that, got an agent, did a show called Trigonometry, which just aired this year, did the last 3 episodes of Trigonometry. And after that, Sitting in Limbo. So that's...
And how did you come to be associated with Sitting in Limbo?
Sitting in Limbo, you know, I came across the script and I pitched my ass off for it, and I met Stephen and the execs, and you know, it was a hard job to get. You know, it was a really great script. So that came through my agents, and I really, really wished to be a part of it.
Brilliant. So I'm going to come back to you in a minute, Stella, but because I think it's quite clear what an actor does, and it's almost quite clear what a writer does, although, Stephen, I'm about to ask you what the process was. But Stella, I want to ask you in a minute what the actual role of the director is. So, but I'll come back to that. So, Stephen, can you just talk us through how, so obviously you've got a background in doing lots of different medium for writing, but what was the process of actually taking the concept, which obviously, or you know, the idea, which you knew you wanted to do, and taking that to writing a script? How do you actually go about doing that?
So Stella mentioned the producers earlier on. So in this case, it was Left Bank Pictures. Producer there, Lila Rawlins. She and I got together and decided on the best approach. We've ended up making a single, but what we originally wanted to do was to do a multi-episode drama.
Yeah, I wanted to ask. I was interested about that. How did that end up being a single?
Yeah, okay, so what we did was we sat down and looked at all the material, we looked at the issue of the Windrush scandal in the round. Obviously a massive story with lots of different stories contained within it. And we as a model, we thought maybe something along the lines of three girls, which kind of has the approach of looking at the story of young girls being sexually targeted and groomed from the perspective of the social services, the police, courts, obviously the girls themselves and their families. And we thought maybe we could do something like that here. So we would have the Home Office, we would have the people who are on the receiving end of their policies, we would have even to the extent of how the government ends up commissioning, if you like, companies like Capita to go out and do their dirty work for them. So we thought we could, do a sort of overview of the whole thing, but it became quickly unwieldy. And I think the BBC were keen to do something quite quickly. So that's how we moved from a multi-episode to a single. They just happened to be looking for singles as well. And then from that point on, it's just a question of getting into a room. Remember those days where you could actually sit in the same room? And it's myself and Lila and various other executives at Left Bank. We sort of, did the whole whiteboard thing. And we realized, obviously, if we're doing a drama, we have to find some way to use the real story and turn that into a piece of fiction, whilst at the same time retaining the essence of the true story and doing my brother and Janet justice. So lots of conversations, really intensive ones at the beginning, putting ideas down on the board. And then once we've agreed what the overview of the story would be, for instance, key decisions, we knew we wanted both detentions in there. We knew we wanted to have a timeline that spanned 2 years, so from 2016 to 2018. We knew that we wanted to have something of the Brexit fallout in there. We wanted to contextualize it in terms of the hostile environment. So we put all those things down on the board, and then it was a question of finding the story within all of that. Once we found the story, the action, I then had to go away and write a first draft. So it sounds very easy, but I tell you, it was very intensive.
How long did the first draft take you?
I think altogether about 8 weeks.
Okay. All right. So moving on to Stella, at what point in the project do you get involved once Stephen's written his draft? And can you just explain to us a bit about what is the role of a director and how you actually work with all the different parts?
Of course.
For those people that don't know.
I come in, there have been a lot of drafts by the time I have already come in. It's in quite a strong position, the draft that's kind of sent out to directors that we pitch on. So, and not much change happens after that until the director's kind of chosen and we have a discussion, which is kind of called a director's draft, but it's not, that's a discussion between Stephen and the producers and I. So what a director does is they choose, they from the point they get involved, they start casting, choosing locations. So those are two of the things that have to be locked down very early. And then hiring heads of departments. So that's my DOP, the first AD, costume, hair and makeup, sound, and production designer. So we hire our HODs and then we start, kind of creating the world. What's everyone wearing? What's the color palette? How do we tell this story through camera? How do we, every single thing about telling the story, shot lists, how the camera is going to tell the story. And then the final piece is getting all the actors together. Usually in TV, there's very little rehearsing. And then, working, that's when I'm on the floor, my main focus is the actors and so
prior to filming, how long has that whole process taken you?
It's about 3 months. Official prep, there's pre-prep, there's soft prep, pre-prep, then official prep is something like 5 weeks.
Okay. Right. And Patrick, I was about to call you Anthony, sorry, forgive me. Patrick, the reason I said that is because I was glad to ask you whether you met Anthony during the process of all of this, and A, how you came to be involved, was that through Stella, and B, what preparation did you do for the role? I know obviously you said you've got Jamaican heritage, so you felt very much part of the story already, but if you could just elaborate on that.
Yeah, I was working away when I got sent the script, which was great because I thought it was a story that needed to be told, because I have a friend whose brother had a similar tale. He had gone to Jamaica and couldn't get back in the country, and was stuck in Jamaica for 6 months before they could sort all that out. So, and that's Junior Green, and his younger brother is my friend. So I was aware of it. So when I saw the script and read it, I mean, I was in tears at the end of that script. So I knew I wanted to be a part of the whole production in some way, shape, or form. And of course, going up for the main guy was great. So for me, I obviously met Stella and the producers, Lila and Pia Wilkie, and yeah, I felt they were on point in terms of what I felt would be a fantastic story that needed to be told and for the whole of this country to hear and to see. And from there, I suppose, having got the gig, which I was chuffed about, yeah, we met Anthony, sort of the end of the sort of first week, sort of rehearsal prepping, and that was fantastic. That was brilliant, just to see him, really, because there's a lot of documentation that's already out there about what happened, but seeing the guy, seeing the man in the room, and just feeling his vibe was brilliant. And I did do one other bit of sort of research in one way, and that was going to his natural habitat where he goes out to Fat Man Hi-Fi every Friday night, most Fridays anyway. And I sort of, everyone knew I was going, he knew I was going, but I got there and just snuck in and had my little corner so I could see him in his natural state, as it were, being. And so that for me was the most flavor I could get from, being him, because I didn't want to try and do any kind of impersonation. I didn't feel that wasn't the story. So I got a feel for Anthony, just seeing him be at the club. And I suppose that was the most I kind of needed to try and portray him, because the story was going to tell, how you're going to feel anyway, because I felt it anyway. It was me, what he'd gone through, essentially, and all of them. Junior Green, we all feel it, because it could all be us. And that's how I feel, that it's, you don't need to act that. You just feel what you've experienced.
Yeah, I can understand that. And when did you actually finish filming, just out of interest?
Well, we had some reshoots after Christmas, didn't we? Yeah, sorry, go on, Stan.
No, you go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, the details. I remember coming back and we had to do some more stuff.
I don't know what day it is today. So.
I'm just thinking it's very lucky that you managed to do it before lockdown, really, that you managed to get it all wrapped up.
Yeah, I mean, there was originally there was a deadline for March, which was crazy. So, we were working so hard towards this insane deadline. And then the TX got pushed to June, but luckily we had finished it by the lockdown, because we were like rushing to TX in March. So it was.
For those people that don't know what TX, that's a transmission day.
That's the day that it airs.
Yeah.
That's the day that it airs on screen.
So actually, I mean, we might want to talk about that, because actually this events in the US have kind of superseded this, but it was already scheduled for this Monday, wasn't it? So it seems like, is that correct? So it's,
yes, yeah. And we were all very worried that it would get overshadowed by COVID. At the time we were just like, it felt like, oh God, no one's going to be really open to hear this at the moment. So it's been an incredible turn of events, really, in terms of the public conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if any of you want to say a bit more about that, and I know that we've got questions from the audience about it, but it's obviously very timely and very raw for many people, and I think that how important is it for you as a writer, Stephen, to see these sorts of stories reflected in your work? And I mean, you already spoke about wanting to reach as wide an audience as possible. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts about that?
So you mean like the events, or you mean the audience?
No, I mean, how important is it for you to be able to represent different stories on our screens and to be able to show different perspectives? For you, this is a very personal story, but it's also, you know, what's being, you know, as a white woman looking at what's going on in the States, it's a human issue. It's something that affects all of us. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of emphasis at the moment about education and about making sure that we absorb films and movies and read books. And I think it's, you know, really timely and really important more than ever that these sorts of stories are told. But I wonder from your perspective how you feel about making sure your voice does get heard and how you can amplify that.
Well, I mean, it's funny because TV in the last, let's say, I don't know, 10 years has changed beyond all recognition. I mean, it's almost become, but well, it's certainly the dominant art form in mainstream culture, I think. It's definitely superseded cinema in terms of audience reach and I think significance. The way we watch TV now, for instance, has changed beyond all recognition. So, you know, so from an audience point of view, I think, you know, the machinery, it needs stories. But the problem is that if it's the same old story over and over and over, you can quickly turn what is a fantastic opportunity at a time when, you know, people are watching TV more than ever into something which turns people off. And that's why these streamers have hit upon these models. They've realized that if they go into various parts of the world and tell local stories, they're always going to have an audience. You know what I mean? Whether it's Paraguay or Guadeloupe or, you know, it's Netflix Guadeloupe, Netflix Paraguay. So here in the UK, you know, we've been, I guess, not saddled, but we've had the traditional broadcasting system, the BBC, ITV, Channel 4. More recently, we've had Channel 5 and so on. And what I always felt in the past is that once you go to these watering holes and you don't, you know, and you come back, you come back unsatisfied because once they shut the door, there's nowhere else for you to go. So, so it's a fantastic time to hear diverse voices. But the only problem I have with it is that too often diverse is synonymous with issues to do with, well, in the case of Black and minority ethnic creatives, are usually synonymous with race and racial identity and racism. And the challenge for the broadcasters and the industry is to allow us to go beyond that. So to answer your question about how important it is for us, for our voices to be heard and our stories to be heard, that's the first step. I think we could all agree with that, but it's also the type of stories. Because this is obviously a fantastic story for all of us to be able to tell. I mean, who better to tell it than us, yeah? But we've got other stories to tell after this. So the real test is whether we're allowed to do that as well.
I think that's right. I mean, Mallory Blackman's been very vocal about the fact that she just wants to have, you know, can we just read normal stories about Black kids going on a date, getting their periods, going to the, you know, having kids. We don't need it to be, and you know, she's you know, she's actually on our advisory board, which is why I'm thinking of her. But I hear your point. Do any of you, I mean, Patrick,
can I just make one further point, Josie?
Please.
What I would say is that, you know, and I don't want to speak for the others, I think what I'm trying to say is that as much as we know that this is something that we really enjoyed making, and we know the thought and the skill that went into it as creatives, we would like at least a little bit of appreciation about that, and as well as the issues that are involved. Because, you know, you don't just throw this story together in a few weeks and then put it up on the screen. But the danger is that that stuff will be lost in the conversation about race and the Windrush scandal and so on. So I'm immensely proud that we're able to do this. We are the people who've been charged with it, if you like. We're almost like conduits, you know, we're just bit part players. And we will always, you know, I'm perfectly happy to have that conversation about the Windrush scandal within the context of sitting in Limbo and outside of it. But I guess in this forum here, I guess we're more concentrated on telling stories and the creative writing in creative industries and how to get in and what stories are allowed to be told and so on. So I think, you know, if we're being completely honest, I think most of our experience will be, we want to be telling different types of stories and not just one. Yeah. So I didn't want to denigrate the Sitting in Limbo film, is what I'm saying.
No, I hear that, and actually, there's a question here. We're going to start taking questions from the audience fairly swiftly. But I have got a question from Sinead already, again about that, saying what was the process like to get it onto the screen? Was it difficult? And how many months did it take to achieve your aim to get to the point where you could start writing?
You mean to go back to writing the first draft?
Yeah.
Okay, so the very first conversation with the producers at Left Bank, between that and writing the first draft, it actually was quite quick. It was probably about 3 or 4 months.
But how did you get to the point that you got Left Bank engaged in the story?
Okay, so a bit like Stella was talking about earlier on, your agent usually has a part to play in that. So in my case, I approached my agent with the idea of maybe turning this into a TV drama, and it was his job to try and find a suitable producer or someone who is amenable to that. And he identified, because he had a good working relationship with her, Lila Rawlings at Left Bank. And then it was just a question of putting us in touch, Lila and myself in touch, and then we could take it from there. So that was a matter of days.
And there's one more specific question on writing that's come through from Aliu, who says, this is really quite technical, I'm not quite sure what the question means, but you will. Did you create an outline at Beachy and treatment, then move on to a script that was influenced by first-hand research?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, we, Lila Rawlings, who's the executive producer, she used a phrase with me which I'd never heard before. Apparently she's used it on a film that she did. I think it's called The Selfish Giant. She calls it a scriptment. And I thought, what? And I think what she was trying to say is that it's a treatment, but it's a very detailed one, which beats out the action. So it's a combination of a beat sheet and a treatment. So yeah, we definitely had to come up with one of those, and it was quite long. And then from there, I did a first draft.
Okay, and Stella, going on to when you kind of assembled all the crew and the cast, how do you make them work as a cohesive unit? How do you get everybody, singing from the same song sheet, so to speak? How do you get everyone to work effectively as a group?
That's probably...
You have to be a dictator.
Get in line. No, that's probably the most... that's a detail of directing that is very important, which is communicating your vision to every head of department so that they can then filter it through their own creativity and translate it into something. So I'm not a dictator, but there's a lot of trust, so Stephen trusts me with the script, and then I trust that to the production designer to say, I want the house to look like this. This is very important. This has to, and I have a color palette, and then I have to express a mood that I want for the rest of the film. I have to be able basically to communicate to everyone my vision so that they can then translate it. It then goes through a process of you're continuously approving or scrapping ideas that come to you. And so it's a lot of decisions. So someone comes to you with, does he wear this cardigan? No, he doesn't. He likes this. Those are the decisions that you have to make hundreds through the day and as quickly as possible so that you can get something on screen. And I think that's a skill that I learned from watching other directors, and then I managed to kind of become good at it, because what the director has to do is have the whole film, only I know what I want to do in the edit and how I want the sound to come in and how I want this outfit to, come back later. That's all in my head. All the
sounds
visuals.
Very all consuming. How do you manage that with being a mum?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's tough, but we're all very lucky to be in jobs that we really enjoy. So this is what I love to do. And I also love being a mum. You sometimes feel, filmmaking is also very intensive for actually a short amount of time. So it's something that I can deal with. I know it's going to be intense for the next few months, but after that, there'll be a big break when I'm looking for the next job. I'm unemployed.
So Patrick, obviously you've done all sorts of things, from, as you said, theatre to telly to film. How does this experience differ for you from doing, something longer form or even live? Like, what's it like to act for telly, for a one-off drama? Like,
it's great. I mean, all the varied things that I've done, it's all part of wanting to do all of those things, having the different experiences and playing the different parts and being in a different genre. But yeah, this was great, because you know, being so uncomfortable in terms of how I felt about it, it was great to go there for me as an actor, because there's times when you can do great parts, and you're doing it live on stage. You don't see it, and you have to be in the room to share that event, as it were. And I've done many of those, and you know, sometimes you wish you could have been able to have filmed that. You know, okay, they get that sort of archive footage of shows on stage, and they're obviously putting it online now, you know, actual performances. But sometimes there's plays, you know, work that you've done on stage that you really wish you could have done in a more intense way. And if you put a camera on those things sometimes. So this is one of those moments where you get a chance to do it all the time. You see, if it was a series, you know, how long would this series go with the turmoil of dealing with injustice, and for how long before, even if as an actor, you just couldn't keep doing it? I mean, you know, when you think about soaps, you know, everything happens to those characters in soaps, everything. And I, you know, how much can you take if one character is going through every trauma that you can imagine happening over 15 years, you know? So no, doing a one-off where it's completely, you know, focused, intense work is great. I've done long-running series, I've done long seasons at, you know, Royal Shakespeare Company. So yeah, doing great kernels of absolute joy in terms of emotional good work, intense work, passionate work, for me is fantastic. And you know, I'm not getting any younger, so you know, a long running stuff which is very, very deep and intense, you know, for some people can turn them absolutely mad. I mean, I was just the gig that I was doing after we finished doing the reshoots. I was working with the Jamie Lloyd Company doing The Seagull, a Chekhov play, and that was in the West End. And I'm working with Emilia Clarke, who most people know from the Game of Thrones series. And in terms of just working, and she's lovely and she's great, and we were, you know, all getting on this whole, you know, new family, new cast. You know, just the chat from her, having been in Game of Thrones for like 10 years, and the intensity that she had to deal with in terms of that series, you know, it's almost like she almost had a nervous breakdown when she finished it. Gosh. You know, and that's 10 years of serious, intense work. And you think, yeah, it can, you know, and she was not long out of drama school, generally, in terms of where her career was going. But, you know, it's catapulted her in one way, but really in terms of how much work you do and for so long, it takes it out of you if you put it in, if you're doing what you know, hopefully most actors will give everything when they do a role. So if you're doing it right, yeah, it can take it out of you, because at the end of the day, you're human, and to go through serious trauma every day for, you know, a good long season of a series, it can, you know, take its toll. So no, this was enough.
Do you have
yes,
any
I could.
flexibility to kind of deviate from the script in any way, or is it very much, you know, do you have any input into it, or is it up, you know, you're very much told what Stephen and Stella tell you to do?
Well, absolutely. They, you know, it's like me doing Shakespeare and I want to make up a line. If the script is good, if the script is good, you want to get it at you. All those words work in that way. And you can embellish here and there, and you can add certain things. And that only comes with the trust that the director may have with you, and obviously the writer. And hopefully, if, you know, they've chosen you to do your thing, then you bring more to it, as well as all those beautiful lines. And because it's, you know, with all due respect to modern piece, you know, you kind of go, yeah, there's lots of different ways of saying that same thing. Yeah. And can we find a way that this character will go, he'll say it like that and not have the last bit, you know? There was lots of bits and pieces in terms of when we, you know, was doing certain scenes, and Stella would say to me, I loved it, right? But you got to get rid of the cha, because they're not going to.
That didn't come from me.
Patrick. I know, Stella, I know, but that's what I mean. You know, there's a lot of creatives going into, you know, what's going to be there at the end of the day. And because I trust Stella in terms of, I do as many versions as I could muster, as if she you know, whatever she wanted, I'd try and try and try. Of course, I felt
there was also a lot of ad lib, like, no, kind of ad-libby stuff with the family, you know, between you and Nadine, you'd say something like very soft and like, you know, all those little moments that they weren't in the script. There's a lot of it actually, Patrick, that's like, it was about relationship and like, you know, how would you, with you and your partner and you and your son and you know, all those little bits was so good.
We've got loads of questions here from the audience. I just quickly want to ask you, Stephen, how do you find, are you involved with the actual filming at all, or do you just hand it all over once you've done that?
Oh no, I hand it over.
So you,
I'm definitely I'm a hands-off writer. I mean, I had to be dragged onto the set.
Okay. And what about your brother?
It was too cold for you, Stephen.
Yeah, way too cold.
And how did your brother enjoy Patrick and the team performance?
I think what, his performance?
Yeah, did he feel like it was how did he feel watching it?
Yeah, he loved it. I mean, I think he thinks that
he's got to say that. I'm here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
He thinks he's better looking than Patrick. That's the only criticism. He said he couldn't have found a slightly better looking actor. But the performance, he's, you know, thumbs up. Yeah.
Let's go to our audience because we've got lots of questions here. There's Ravni, who is one of our alumni who works at Tiger Aspect Films, wants to know, what was your most memorable moment of this whole process, each of you? Just a quick summary. What have you found? What's been your highlight from any part of it, from filming to writing or?
Stella?
Oh my God, it was definitely filming. It was the family, the jokes we were having. We were just almost weeing ourselves every day. That is something that I really will take away from, because it was a very heavy subject and sometimes there were very heavy scenes, and I liked to keep the cast and the crew uplifted and have an escape, you know, and not have to live in this kind of heavy darkness. So we laughed a lot. So that is one thing I will take away. We laughed so much.
Stephen, what's your highlight been?
So many, but I mean, you know, seeing it cast, that was a really big, enjoyable moment. Going onto the set, even though I say I had to be dragged onto it, that was actually, whoa, this is fun. But I think overall, I would have to say, seeing the very first cut, when it's all stitched together, you know, and you think, oh my God, you know, now it's on the screen. And in those days, you could watch it on a you know, fairly big screen. So yeah, I think that's probably my highlight, seeing the whole thing screened for the first time.
And Patrick, what's your highlight so far?
Well, so much of it is the highlight. But I'm absolutely with Stell when it comes down to the cast and laughing on set and keeping the spirit going, even though we're talking about a very heavy subject. And you know, and for me, I suppose it's not one moment. It's that there's so many of those moments where we were just happily hanging out and laughing, and I suppose I can just coin one bit where we were doing the music stuff there, when we were doing the party stuff, and I was playing music, and even though it wasn't actual playing it, but we were doing the music with the system, and I thought, this is where I couldn't believe I was. In other words, I'm in a West Indian feeling place with people, and we're filming it, so we're doing something that I love to do, and we're playing reggae music, and we're all having fun, and you've got a camera on it, and I got low battery.
Oh!
Yeah, I got low battery, I got charging, I'm sorry, see, I've got so much mess. So it's basically having been in, you know, a West Indian family and having that world, we recreated that, and I was in it doing what I love to do, which is the acting. So, you know, that world, I suppose, you know, it's down to Stella Karadi, obviously, in creating the vibe for all the people that were there, and everyone in terms of, you know, her cast. I call them the female mafioso. because she had great team, and mostly women, and they were doing everything that so, and they were brilliant, absolutely fantastic. You kind of go, well, are you surprised? I go, no, but I love the fact that Stella was the head of going, right, come on guys, and the whole feeling and the whole passion of doing it. We kept going, we kept working, and we do it everything we possibly can.
I mean, we had a very heavy female crew. I think it was like 60%. It was a very high percentage female crew.
Yeah.
And all, our cast was all Black and Caribbean heritage. So it's like, we felt as we were doing it that this was something different, that this was something special, that none of us had been on a set like that before, basically.
Yeah. Amazing. So Stella, I've got a couple of questions for you actually, specifically. One from kids saying, what challenges did you face as a woman, as a director, if any? And
I
also, do you have any
question, and it's specifically a white woman, and I do want to answer that.
Yeah. And the next question is from Minoli, which is, do you have any advice for people who want to break into the industries? I think you might, and the question is, and get into directing, but they haven't studied directing because it's quite intimidating. So if you could take those two briefly, that would be helpful.
Okay, so what are some of the challenges? I mean, there was a lot of challenges on this film. And those are some of the challenges that we face now, which is kind of asking ourselves questions, really deep questions about privilege and about representation and things like very important things when it comes to the screen. It's specifically, how are we going to portray this story, which is a very heavy and very, it's a violent story, it's very, how do we portray it in a way that everyone can connect to it and feel the love and the heart and the soul of this person and his family and what they went through? So all of those questions, all those challenges in how we bring that to the screen, I think, they're very thought out and they're very much discussed with my producers, with Stephen, with my cast, with my DO, Rena Yang. She was amazing. With my editor, Lee McCarkill, who has joined the chat, it's exactly like every single decision we make is going to result, is going to have an effect. Every cause we make has an effect. So everything has to be thought out and have intent, so those are some of the challenges, and those decisions are always met with being challenged. So, I'm not the head of this pyramid. I answer to executive producers, and they answer to the BBC, and they answer to the government and the taxpayers. So all these things come into play when you're trying to make a decision and you're trying to make the best decision for this film. It's challenged, it's questioned, it's vetoed, it's shaved off. Those things do happen, and it's about whether the compromise is worth it, whether you are happy with the compromise, whether everyone is happy, whether Stephen is happy, whether the voice of this film is happy, which is Stephen's voice. I think I've asked you like so many times, Stephen, if you are happy. Like, I just have to and whether Anthony.
I'm happy. Jazz hands.
But that's the responsibility that I feel. It's not. I'm just one thing about being a director is you can't have an ego. It's not about you. It can't be about you. So it's about, it's about the story and servicing that story. So you have to be the vessel, and that is going to mean that you come up against challenges. Usually.
Haley wants to know, were there any moments where you weren't happy with things and done by other departments, and how do you deal with it?
I mean, it's an ongoing thing. I still don't know if I'm happy with it, until I'm too close to it. There's many disappointments, and there's many challenges. How do I deal with that? If it's something, I fight it, I fight it all the time. Maybe that's going to get worn down as I work more years, but right now I'm hungry for the fight. Like, I love it. Like, I'm from Hackney. I love a fight. Like, I will.
Street fighter.
So that is that's what we do. You get something, someone says no, so you fight that, and you keep fighting it until someone backs down, someone has to back down. So a fighting spirit is very much how you get through it.
Thank you. Patrick, I have a question here from Colton, who says, how do you prepare for the role mentally when it's such a difficult and close to home subject?
Well, it's no real different from many of the other roles that I played in one way, because you have imagination, because everything starts from there. So when you read a book, your imagination gives you the whole things you through it, the pictures, and you are with actually what you can relate to. So mentally, it was letting go of the anger and being in the man and hoping that you can accept, the first time you hear someone say, well, you've lost your job. And because we won't pay you. Go, well, what do you mean? So you have to hear everything for the first time and not be preempting anything, and almost being a blank canvas, but obviously being the blank canvas of the story unfolding. You have the character and you're going through your life. So yeah, lots of different ways of applying, behind a character. For me, it was knowing the story of the Windrush and everything that's gone on with the hostile environment it did with the last few years, well, over the last 10, 15, 20 years. And then knowing he's a regular guy. He's not a villain. There's no underlying anything, as much as, he's a regular guy. So, and that's how I applied to find the character and to do the piece. So not too much thinking and trust you.
Thank you. That's really Stephen, somebody has asked, are there any difficulties taking an idea based on racial issues to teams which lack diversity themselves?
You mean like issues for me?
Yes. Or did you come? Yeah, I guess so. The question is really,
that's the funny thing about it. I didn't encounter anything. I mean, there were in the first few weeks, I was continuously reminded of the underrepresentation of people of color in the industry, because when you walk into the left bank building or the offices, which is the sort of sprawling open plan sort of space, you realize you're the only black person in there. I think there was only one person of color in the building, and he was Asian. I think he's now moved on to work for the BBC. So there's that visual representation, but once you get into the room where you're doing the spitballing, everyone's so enthusiastic about the story, you forget about that. Later on in the process, of course, when you're doing the nitty-gritty of the actual scripts themselves, the nuances, some of the things that Patrick has said outlined earlier on, that allows us to tell the story from the inside, if you like. When you're running that by the various cooks, then that can be a little bit like, okay, it's not so much a fight, but you have to do a little bit more explaining or contextualizing, or certain phrases, certain attitudes. It's strangely enough, like some of the things that we've got in the script, where we move away from the real story, move away from the real characters, because of course we owe our primary fealties to the drama. Janet, for instance, I mean, these guys know this story already. When she saw the first cut, she said, "Oh, you guys have done a great job, but you've made me very lovey-dovey." But I know Janet very well, and she's just not that person. She's not touchy-feely and lovey-dovey, but she dotes on my brother completely. So the emotion is there, and we've also just added the tactile quality. But when we were doing the various drafts of the script, I was arguing against that more, if you like, openly affectionate portrayal. So it's those kind of things. Not so much challenges, they're not battles, but it's just a difference of emphasis.
Thank you. I'm really conscious that there's loads of questions, but we are slightly running out of time. I just wanted to ask you all, before we wrap up, what is next for each of you? What's next for you, Stella?
I'm trying to write at the moment my feature film, so I'm trying to write at home.
Can you tell us what, are we allowed to know what it's about?
Oh, it's like semi-autobiographical about my childhood, which was really messed up.
Okay, well, keep us posted. Sounds great.
I can play Granddad. I can play him.
Granddad, yeah, you can, Patrick. You're not old enough.
Maybe I'm too dark now. Too dark, isn't it? And was he a Trini? He was a Trini, wasn't he?
Yeah, Trini.
Oh.
Patrick, what's up? What's next for you, Patrick?
Who knows? Will anyone go to the theatre in the next year and a half? Will anyone be doing anything without the productions having the right kind of insurance and before you have to take the vaccine and da. But apart from that, I am writing a couple of things as well.
Good.
But it would be a film. But I'm going to be doing some. I'm reading some stories for children. My grandchildren are like 1 and 2, because my daughter adopted 2 little girls just before Christmas, and it's just been, anyway, I'm really excited. So I've been doing little videos of telling stories, but I'm going to be doing, hopefully no one's going to teeth this idea, but in the end, I don't care. Let everyone do it. I'm reading some sort of West Indian and Jamaican folk tales for children. So I'm going to be doing a kind of Jack and Ori thing.
I might teeth it.
That's what I'm thinking. Why should I don't? Tell all the stories. Do you know what I mean? Why aren't they having these stories in schools? And that's the one thing I'm doing. It's like saying, giving back to the community. I'm going, I'm bringing the youngsters coming through in terms of education. If they have stories that's not just Jack and Jill, every fairy tale doesn't feature any brothers or sisters.
Yeah.
So let's have those stories which do. Yeah. And put them in schools, because, we've learnt about Jack and Jill and all the rest of it, and there's no brothers and sisters in that. Why can't they learn about Anansi tales? And, so for me, I'm thinking, there's a gap, there's a market. That's what I'm going to do, because, I tell stories.
Love that.
That's what I'm up to.
Love that. Thank you. And Stephen, how about you?
Well, I've, as you know, I said earlier on, I also write books. So I'm writing. I've had to put it down because of sitting in limbo. But I've been writing a massive novel for the last 4 years. So I'm hoping to pick that up again at the end of this year. But in terms of TV stuff or screenwriting, what I'd like to do is I'd like to do a bit more of what we did with this. I'd like to put more Black stories on the screen, small or big, and I'm talking about I mentioned earlier on a diversity of stories. So I've got maybe 1 or 2 things in very, very early stages of development. We know how tough this industry is. You've got to own them first before you put them out there. And I'm actually quite superstitious about stories anyway, so I won't give anything more away than that. But suffice it to say that more Black stories on the screen featuring more Black characters, men and women, in this kind of context, like in Sitting in Limbo. So ordinary stories, not drugs, not crime, not and if it is genre, then seeking to say something about our experiences through the genre. So whether it's a thriller or some other genre.
Well, we are very excited about that. It all sounds amazing. Literally 1 sentence each from you both before we thank you, Stella. 1 sentence each from you on your advice for people who want to direct, write, act. So starting with you, Stella. Sorry, I'm not giving you long because I'm conscious of time. But what's your advice for people who want to?
Try and get on set and see how it works. Try and figure out all the roles and understand what everyone does. That's the biggest education you can have.
Thank you.
And watch as many films as possible.
Very good. Patrick?
Yeah, just do it. Just do it. Use your imagination. Just do it. And that's what the youngsters have a chance of doing right now, because there's more scope to just get your phone out and just do it. Make something. And, you have to just do it.
I like that. And Stephen?
If I write every day, so I would stress that. And if you're not writing physically, you should be thinking about it. try and make writing the center of your being or existence or daily existence. And then practice, practice, practice. And Stella mentioned watching as many things as possible. That I always say that in context of books, read as many books as you can whilst you're writing. Similarly, if you're interested in watching writing TV dramas, then you should be watching TV dramas. So those two things go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
But try to write regularly because it becomes a habit.
Yeah, I've heard that. That's very good advice. So listen, I'm sorry to those of you whose questions we didn't get to answer. Stella's kindly offered if you want to approach her on Instagram, if she can answer any of your questions or email. And we are very excited about Monday night. All of you, make sure you watch it. Just a quick plug to say that next week we've got, for those of you that want to work in TV, we've got Lauren from ITV and Dawn from CPR Productions and Arrow Media doing a talk on getting into telly, and the week after we're being joined by one of our alumni, Raj Sandhu, who's now a BBC Scotland correspondent. She's going to be interviewing Adea Depatan, the wheelchair basketball player and also children's book writer, so we're excited about that. And we've got loads more great events lined up, so just to head to our social media and look at the link tree and you'll see them there. But I'm just going to end now by saying thank you to Nicole and Ian and the crew at IJPR, and thank you to you guys. It's been a real privilege and honour speaking to you, and we could have gone on for ages, but
it's a pleasure.
Can't wait to see it, and really let's hope that things start to change, and thank you for amplifying voices and for doing the amazing stuff and for joining us today.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us, and we're going to head off now. Thank you again.